We're going to finish up our postcard by creating some 3D text at the top here. So I'll go ahead and choose your type tool. I'm going to choose impact, and I know that I want the size to be at least 40 points. And I know that I also want it to be a light color. So I'll click and start typing. So that looks pretty good, but now I want to go ahead and give it some warping, give it a little bit of a three-dimensional look. I'll adjust the bend down a little bit and increase the horizontal distortion. Click OK. That's still a little bit small, so with my text selected, I'm going to go ahead and increase the size by using the scrubby sizing values. That looks a lot better. So go ahead and commit to that and save my file. Now I'm going to convert this to 3D, and we have a 3D workspace. So I'm going to come up here to my workspace, hit the double chevron, and choose 3D. This opens up a 3D panel which is currently empty since I don't have any 3D objects. Now down here I can tell it to go ahead and create a new 3D object, and I want to use the selected layer, which is my text, to a Repoussé object, or I can go to my 3D menu, from Repoussé, choose Text Layer. It has to rasterize the text into pixels before it can go ahead and give them depth. And this opens up our Repoussé editing window. I have a number of presets to choose from. I'm going to choose this third one here with a bevel. And I'm going to go ahead and change the extrusion depth to 1 so it's not quite so deep. And I want to go ahead and change the height to -5. And I'm going to change the width to 7 so it's a little bit smaller on the bevel. And then I'm going to change my contour to a simple concave look. And that looks a whole lot better. Now, with this still up, I can make some more changes to it. For example, the materials on the surfaces. All surfaces, the front, the bevel, the sides, the back bevel, or the back side. And I can easily do that under Materials here. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and leave that as is and click OK. And you can see now in my 3D scene, it's populated by what we call the greetings mesh. The mesh is this now 3D subject, or 3D object. I can come down here and I can start using my various rotate and view tools. So here, for example, I will take my object, and when I select the Object Rotate tool, I get my axis, which shows me my RGB or my X, Y, and Z axes. And I can grab these and start moving it on any of the axes by grabbing that on the tips. I can start scaling it by grabbing that box, and I can also rotate it on a single axis, or if I just move it on the object itself, on multiple axes. And you can see how the multiple axes are represented by the change in our axis here. So I just want to kind of get that rotate a little bit around like so. And I need to move it, so I'll come up here to my options bar and go to my pan tool and just slide it into place. And that looks a little bit better, except it's still kind of white and kind of chunky. Now if I go back to my 3D panel and choose Scene, here I can change the quality of the settings for rendering. It's currently set to interactive, which is the fastest, and this is where you want it to be while you're modeling. When you're getting ready to see the final results, go to Ray Traced, and this grid indicates the areas of the pixels that the ray tracing engine is looking at to figure out how to redraw the 3D mesh. And you can see with ray tracing, we clean up the edges and now we get shadows. But for working, let's go back to simple interactive. Now, I don't want this to just be plain white. I'd like the sides to have some color, the extrusion. So to do that, I can come over here and select one of the sides. In this case, we might take, for example, the front inflation material. And that's currently set up with a white map. And over here is the type of material that it's using. Well, if I click on this, I have set up a list view. If you don't see a list, choose it from over here in the menu and make sure that I have no texture. So it's just a flat surface, and it automatically gives it a light gray. We'll go ahead and live with that for now. What I'd like to do is change the sides here. So I choose the extrusion material. Again, I might come over to the side, make sure we have no texture on it so it's a flat surface. But then instead of just using this color, I'm going to come over here, click on the folder, and tell it to create a new texture. I'll just use the default settings and click OK, and you can see it changes it to a white. Now I want to change that to a gradient, so I'll come back to this little menu over here and choose Open Texture. This opens that particular file I just created, and you can see it's plain white. So I'm going to go ahead and get my gradient tool, And I'm going to choose a gradient that I've already built that goes yellow to orange. And I'm going to go ahead and click and drag it, pressing the Shift key for a straight line so I have a gradient. Now, as soon as I save this, Command or Control S, it updates my mesh on the final image. So anytime you need to change it, you can do it quite easily by just going in and editing it. So that looks a lot better. Again, I'm going to come over here now, maybe change my camera rotation and adjust this a little bit more like so. And once I'm happy or satisfied with the way it looks, let's see, we'll go on that just a wee bit more. There we go. That looks pretty good. And again, we can always just rotate it up and around a little bit more if we need to. And that looks pretty good. And if I'm happy with that, I can go ahead and take a look at it with my interactive to ray traced instead. When you switch to ray tracing on the quality of your scene, again, you can see now what's happening with shadows. Now, the shadows are controlled by the extrusions and the bevels, but it's also controlled by lights. And if we go down in the scene, you can see that we have 3 what are known as infinite lights. These lights can't really be pointed, but they can be positioned a little bit in space. And each one makes it look a little bit different. Now I'm going to go back to my interactive mode so it speeds up, and I can adjust my lights by selecting them, and then I can come down to my light controls down here, for example, my rotate tool. And I can just rotate the light, which I may or may not see, and you can see the effect it has on the mesh. Now if I'd like to see where the light is, I can come down to the bottom here, and I can tell it to show me my 3D light. And it'll show me these little bulbs here are my 3 different lights. So now as I move it around, you can see how this light trace, this line of where the light's falling, is changing the way it affects my mesh. So I'll go ahead and move my infinite light 1, and here's infinite light 2, which I'll turn off, and that gives me a nice shadow effect on there. So I'll go ahead now, that looks pretty good. If I go back up to my scene, I can then change to the ray traced look, and you can see it's just ray tracing this area in here. It builds it, it looks a lot better, very quick and easy. So now if I want to, I'm going to come back, turn off my 3D lights, because I don't want to see those when I render my image. And that looks pretty good. Let me see what happens if I turn my infinite light on, number 2, and turn it off again, and maybe number 3. And if I need to, I can continue to go ahead and adjust the lighting by just dragging it around. That looks pretty good. Now we can go ahead, save the image, and we're done.